Okay, the main objective of this webinar is to highlight the link between fundamental science, which leads to understand the behavior of plants, to be applied to group improvement. We strongly believe that this type of activities stimulate a cross-fertilization in the scientific community from different parts of the world. This is framed in the context of the stress physiology group of the plant physiology area, which I coordinate, of the Institute of Plant Physiology and Genetic Resources from INTA. Furthermore, Dr. Giselle Martinez Noel from Inbiotech CONICET Mar del Plata joined us to the organization of this webinar. I would like to especially thank the INTA team behind the scenes, Carolina Rubiolo, Andrea Zanini, Rodrigo Parola, Giuliano Barbieri, Elizabeth Valespiani, and Silvina Odetto. Today is our third meet in the framework of this webinar, and I'm very happy to present a great researcher, Professor Christian Meyer. After a PhD in plant immunochemistry, he studied plant nitrogen metabolism, and in particular, the regulation of nitrate assimilation. He has contributed to the inception of plant TOR studies, and his present goals are to identify and characterize components of the plant TOR signaling pathway. At present, he is a researcher at INRA, France. He has guided numerous bachelor, master, PhD students and postdocs. He has published numerous papers and book chapters and has an H index above 43 and more than 8,000 of citations. Today, he will talk about control of plant metabolism by the conserved TOR kinase. I would like to thank him very especially for this talk. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Marianela, for this very nice introduction. So I hope that you can all hear me well. Just tell me if there is any problem in the slides or in the audio. So first, I'm very glad and honored to have been invited by Giselle Martinez Noel and Marianela Rodriguez to give this seminar today. And I will start right now. So I will today talk about the role of the conserved TOR kinase, target of rapamycin kinase, in the control of plant metabolism and plant growth. So I am Christian Meyer, as Marianela said, and I'm working at the Jean-Pierre Bourget Institute in Versailles at INRA. And most of this work has been done in collaboration, very close collaboration with the Professor Christophe Robert-Liard, within Marseille, France as well. So I'm putting his name together with mine. So let's see if it works. I cannot move the slides. Yes, sorry. I could also put news. I hope you see my my mouse pointer. So just to tell you where we are all working, I'm working, as I said, in the Jean-Pierre Bourget Institute, and we are located into the park of the Versailles Castle, so near Paris, right here. So here is a big Versailles Castle, which you may have heard of. And Christophe is working in Marseille, near the Mediterranean Sea, in a very big university research institute. So, well, I guess you all know that plants need to adjust their metabolism, but also their growth to the nutrient level, to the nutrients which are available, but also to adapt to all the abiotic and biotic stresses that plants encounter during their lives. So as you may know, when you provide optimum level of both nutrients, nitrogen, potassium, other nutrients, macronutrients, and light, plants are happy and grow well, they develop quickly. But if you limit some of the nutrients, whether it's light or nitrogen or other macronutrients, plants limit their growth to the level of the limited nutrient supplies. And this is actually an active process. I mean, it's just not a limitation of growth because there is not enough nutrients and not enough food for the plants, but plants sense that there is a lack of one of these nutrients, and in consequence, they adopt and limit their growth. But also there is an adaptative growth, because for instance, if you starve these Arabidopsis plants for nitrogen, they will limit very significantly the growth of the aerial part. But if you look to the roots are as big or even bigger than control plants, because the nitrogen-starved plants develop more roots to explore more soil volumes to try to get more nutrients out of the soil. So it's both an adaptative and a strong response to the availability of nutrients. But to do that, plants need to be able both to perceive the level of nutrients, to perceive also the presence of both abiotic or biotic stresses, and to use this information to modulate their growth, to modulate their metabolism, and to translate this information into this growth and metabolic decisions. Whether it's in relation with energy, which is driven, of course, for photosynthesis, so with the help of light, to control either metabolism, growth, and development, so adaptative growth. And we have been interested in how plants perceive this information for quite a while. And when we started this project more than about 20 years ago, one protein which was known in animals and yeast to be central for this perception of nutrient and stress level was the TOR kinase, the target of rapamycin kinase, which was discovered in yeast, later in animals, and which has appeared as really a central component of this system. So we have the question, is this kinase present in plant, and what is its roles in plants? So first, what is TOR? TOR is, as its name says, the target of rapamycin. It means that it has been isolated in yeast using a screen for rapamycin resistance. Rapamycin is an antibiotic produced by a bacteria, Streptomyces hygroscopicus, which has been isolated from a soil sample from Easter Island. That's why you often see this moai when people are talking about TOR, because it's related to rapamycin. And Eastern Island is also known as Rapa Nui in Polynesians, hence the name rapamycin. And this antibiotic was used in yeast to make a genetic screens. And one of the mutations that has been picked up because it confers a resistance to rapamycin was mutation in the target of rapamycin. Mutation of the target of rapamycin, loss of target of rapamycin activity is lethal in yeast and other eukaryotes, but the mutation that has been picked up is mutation conferring resistance to this antibiotic. I will not go into much details about how it works, but it works because it makes a ternary complex with another proteins to inhibit the TOR kinase. So what is the TOR kinase? It's a very large kinase. It's about 250 kilodalton, so it's a very large protein that is present in all eukaryotes. It's a protein kinase, which means that it phosphorylates both serine and threonine residues, but its kinase domain is very homologous to lipid kinase, to phosphoinositol 3 lipid kinases. So it's a very particular class of protein kinases. So it's made basically by a large number of these so-called heat repeats, which allow protein-protein interactions, and various other domains which are specific for this family of kinases, together with the ATM and ATR kinases, which are also close to TOR. It's known to be, I will come back to this later, antagonist kinase of SNRK1, SNF1 in yeast, AMP kinases in animals. So it has been very quickly, it has been apparent that TOR is not working a lot, but in working in high molecular weight complexes. And there are two TOR complexes in yeast and animals, TORC1 and TORC2. But for the time being, only the TORC1 complex has been identified in plants, which of course also contain this TOR kinase. So the two proteins that are interacting with the TOR kinase to make the TORC1 complex are called RAPTOR, which also contain HEAT repeats and WD40 repeats, which is also involved in protein-protein interaction, and which is actually phosphorylated by SNRK1 in plants or AMP kinases SNF1 in respectively animals or yeast. And this is the substrate of the SNRK1 phosphorylation, which in turn inhibits TOR when SNRK1 is activated. There is always this equilibrium between TOR and SNRK1 kinase. When one is active, the other is inactive, and it's vice versa. When one is active, the other is inactive, because now it has been also shown, at least in animals, that TOR phosphorylates and inactivates SNRK1. So it makes this very large complex because it's a dimer of TOR kinase on these two proteins. And the last protein is called LST8. It's lethal with Sex13 protein 8 in yeast. And it's only a small protein made by WD40 repeats. Fortunately, because as I told you, the TOR mutations are lethal in eukaryotes, including plants. So it's difficult to work with TOR mutants, but we are now able to use very specific pharmacological inhibitors like this AZD8550 made by AstraZeneca, which inhibits specifically and very efficiently the TOR kinase in animals, but also in plants. So I will not go into historical details on how the TOR signaling pathway has been building in plants, because it has started, of course, very slowly, because we lacked all the tools to address the TOR functions. But now, with the advent of these TOR inhibitors, with the help of RNA silencing, we've been able to decipher what is the TOR signaling pathway, at least a first hint of what could be the TOR signaling pathway in plants. It's probably much more complex than that. Basically, TOR is activated when nutrients are present, either sugar or amino acids, like in other eukaryotes. It's also activated by other nutrients, including sulfur, phosphorus, etc. By light, of course. It's regulated by upstream chaperone complexes that are activated by ATP, these RT2P TTT complexes. And it regulates many wealth of biological processes, including, of course, mRNA translation. It's one of the main targets of TOR. Nitrogen assimilation, development, amino acid metabolism, plasmodesmata transport, mRNA splicing, autophagy, which is inhibited by TOR, synthesis of lipids and starch, etc. Basically, when conditions are favorable in terms of stresses and nutrients, TOR is activated and promotes cell divisions, mRNA translations, processes which are very costly on an energetic point of view. And this collectively contributes, of course, to plant growth and development. So, just to trying to summarize what is the role of TOR in sugar signaling, for instance, sugars in general, whether you provide them in different forms, activate TOR. This has been shown clearly, also including by the group of Genshin. And this activation of TOR results in, for instance, shoot and root meristem activation, growth, proliferation, cell divisions, but also many other processes, including gene regulation or splicing. There is a nice paper from Ezequiel Petrio, which will come out soon, showing also that mRNA splicing is regulated by TOR, by sugar through TOR activity. How are sugar regulating TOR? So this is not completely clear in plant, of course. No, but at least has been shown by several groups, from Jacob Bronkart and Genshin, that glucose activates TOR activity, probably through activation of oxidative phosphorylation and mitochondrial activity, which through mechanisms that are unknown so far, activate the TOR complex, which promote growth. In animals, it's the mechanism by which sugar activates TOR is a bit clearer, and it has been shown that when glucose is present, the lysosomal VATPase, so vacuolar ATPase, activates TOR through a complex known as the regulators. Not going into much details, but when glucose is absent, AMPK, which is the orthologs of SNRK1, becomes activated, recruit this axin-LKBP1 complex, inhibits the VATPase regulator complex, which dissociates and inactivates TOR upon glucose starvation. Of course, all these components are present in plants, but it remains to be established that the same mechanism is acting. But so far, it has been strikingly conserved through evolution. The mechanism by which TOR is activated by nutrients has been strikingly conserved through evolution, so it would not be completely surprising that this is also active in plants. A very similar mechanism is involved in amino acid activation of TOR. When amino acids are in low content, when plant organisms are nitrogen starved, this VATPase is deactivated and regulates inactivates the regulator complex, which inactivates TOR activity. When amino acids are present, they go into the lysosome or the vacuole in yeast. Mechanism is also conserved in yeast, activate the VATPase, dissociate the regulator, which recruits the TORC1 complex from the cytosol, activate it, which then phosphorylate all the TOR downstream targets. So this is very well known in animals and yeast. It's a very complex mechanism with many different steps. And of course, this is also remains to be established in plants. So we started to address these questions of what are the TOR substrates in plants, are they different or not? Some time ago, so several years ago, with a PhD student named Thomas Dobrunel, and one of the first things we tried to do is use something which is easy to purify, which are polysomes. Polysomes are ribosomes translating mRNA, so it's a complex of several ribosomes associated to an RNA. Purifying these polysomes and trying to see if there are specific proteins that show differences in phosphorylation when TOR is inactivated. So to make a long story short, we identified in the ribosomal protein S6 one of such TOR-regulated residue. I hope you can see my mouse. Maybe I can, I don't have it here. This serine 240, phosphorylation of which decreases when TOR is silenced in plants here. And this serine 240 residue is rather conserved in all eukaryotes because it was already known that TOR, through the activation of a kinase called S6 kinase, is able to phosphorylate this ribosomal protein S6 at this C-terminal serine residues, including then in Arabidopsis, because this study was done in Arabidopsis, and you can see that this serine residue is conserved from human to yeast through Arabidopsis and Drosophila, but actually the biological role of this serine phosphorylation by TOR is not really well known. Has not been really established, but it's probably important because it's conserved. So basically, when TOR is active, this serine residue is phosphorylated, and we have been using this feature to produce a phosphoserine specific antibody which recognizes phosphorylated ribosomal protein S6, and you can see here that this antibody works quite well. When we treated the plant with AZD, so the TOR-specific inhibitors, which inactivate TOR, which then decrease phosphorylation of S6 kinase and of ribosomal protein S6, you see that AZD very clearly reduces the phosphorylation of ribosomal protein S6. Similarly, when we treated sugar starch plant with sucrose, this phosphorylation goes up very strongly, but takes some time, several hours, 24 to 24 hours. So it takes time to be regulated, but sucrose and glucose are very strong inducers of this phosphorylation through TOR activity, so inducer of TOR activity. And similarly, we had genetic proof that this phosphorylation is specific because in TOR silence RNAi line, we see that this phosphorylation is significantly decreased upon induction because it's inducible silencing. This is work done that has been done also by Céline Forzani, which was a postdoc in our lab. I'm always missing the top part of the slide, but as you can see here, this phosphorylation is increasing, this decrease, the effect of AZD is increasing during time. And you can see again clearly that this RPS6 phosphorylation is going down. And you have also the kinetics of sugar induction that you see that you need at least 2 hours after addition of sucrose to sugar starch plants to induce TOR activity. Sorry. So, as I told you, TOR kinase mutants are lethal. They stopped at the embryo development. So we took advantage of the fact that both Raptor and LST8 mutants are not lethal in Arabidopsis. But this is not the case in yeast and animals, but at least in plants, these mutants are not lethal. To try to address also the role of the TOR kinase through genetic approaches. So first, just to an example, showing that TORC1 mutants are hypersensitive to stresses. When we germinated both Raptor or LST8 mutants without sodium chloride, you see that the germination of the mutants and the wild type is rather similar, even if some Raptor or LST8 mutant already show a bit less germination. But when you apply a rather strong Sol stress, here you see that both LST8 and these Raptor mutants have a strong delay in germination, so they are hypersensitive to this Sol stress, and this is true for many other abiotic stresses. Similarly, and this was the work of Alyona Kravchenko, part of her PhD in the lab, these mutants are also hypersensitive to abscisic acid because when you germinate these plants on increasing concentration of abscisic acid, you see that all TORC1 mutants show a hypersensitivity to ABA and a strong decrease of germination in response to ABA. Also, ABA concentration are much lower in these mutants and also in AZD-treated plants, probably as a feedback mechanism because these plants are hypersensitive to ABA, so probably they decrease ABA synthesis in response of that. Of course, one of the ways to explain that is that when you have, again, lower TOR activity, you have higher SNRK1 activity, so your sensitivity to ABA is much higher. Oops. Then we looked, one of the most affected plants, TORC1 mutants, were the LST8 mutants. So these small WD containing repeats proteins. And LST8 mutants you see are much smaller than the wild type here in short day. But one of the striking observations that we made quite early on is that when you transfer these plants from short days, which is 8 hours of day, to long day, 16 hours of days, most of the LST8 mutants will die. The surviving ones you see are very bushy. Most of them are sterile, so they're completely altered in terms of branching and development, and also in flowering times, because they show very delayed flowering and a very decreased fertility. we try to better understand the basis of this long day hypersensitivity by performing both metabolite and transcript analysis using our platforms in Versailles. And we observe that in the wild type plants, when you transfer them abruptly from 8 hours to 16 hours of day, what happens is that they accumulate a lot of galactinol and raffinose, which are stress-related carbohydrates. Raffinose is a trisaccharide, which accumulates a lot, which accumulates strongly in response to a variety of both abiotic and biotic stresses, and not surprisingly, wild-type plants accumulate very high level of this raffinose upon transfer to long day. But the LST8 mutants, so the TORC1 mutants, were completely unable to accumulate, you see, they always here, to accumulate raffinose or galactinol in response to long day stress. In the opposite, they accumulated a lot of proline, which is also a stress-related metabolite that accumulate transiently in the wild type, but then decreases when raffinose is increasing. And they also accumulate a huge levels of glutamine, which is also a hallmark of TOR inactivations in several organisms and in plants, and can also be related to the fact that these plants, most of them are dying. Then we try to better understand why these plants are accumulated raffinose, and one of the important enzymatic activity, I don't know if I can come back, so I will stay here, in raffinose biosynthesis is catalyzed by an enzyme called myoinositol phosphate synthase 1, because it makes myoinositol phosphate, which is used during raffinose synthesis as a cofactor. And interestingly, these mutant plants are also hypersensitive to long day. And when you compare the transcriptome of LST8 mutants compared to wild type in long day with the one of MIPS1 mutants, it's rather similar. So some of the variation, the phenotypic differences and hypersensitivity to long day that we observe could be due to deficiency in myoinositol phosphate synthase 1. So as I said, MIPS1 is catalyzing the transformation of glucose 6-phosphate into myoinositol that is used as a cofactor for galactinol synthesis. It's a sugar alcohol using myoinositol, and which then is condensed with sucrose to make raffinose. I think you had a talk by Wim recently that probably explained to you much better what is synthesis and role of raffinose in plants, Wim van der Linden. So this defect in raffinose, of course, could explain some of the hypersensitivity to abiotic stresses, but we also tried to take advantage of this very strong growth phenotype of the LST8 mutants to look for suppressors that could also allow us to identify more components of the TOR signaling pathway in plants, because at this time we didn't really know a lot of participants in the TOR signaling pathway in plants compared to yeast or animals. So the initial idea was to use these small LST8 mutants and mutate them with EMS and to look for plants that would grow better than the original mutants and eventually as good as the wild type. So Céline Forzani was brave enough to embark on this suppressor screen because, as I told you, most of the LST8 plants are sterile, so not very easy to collect enough seeds, but even more difficult to make this screen, which was based on an in vitro screen first. Here you have some wild type plants, the original mutants, and some suppressor plants here. That then has to be grown in the greenhouse to make seeds. We were able to isolate 6 of these suppressors of LST8 that we call the SOL-like suppressor of LST8, and we used direct sequencing of the M2 mutants to directly identify the causal mutations. So what we did is identify homozygous mutations in each of the suppressors and look to these homozygous mutations if they change something strong in protein sequences, and also if they could correspond to something already known in other organisms. Fortunately, we had two suppressor lines which carried mutation in the same genes, which was a strong indication that this is the causal mutation for the suppressor lines. And this gene which was mutated corresponded to the ortholog of the yeast YAC1 kinase. This was already known as the Arabidopsis YAC1. And indeed, mutation in tDNA mutation in YAC1 also suppressed TOR deficiencies in Arabidopsis, and mutations in YAC1 segregated with the suppressing phenotypes. So what is YAC1? YAC1 stands for yet another kinase 1. We didn't name it, but we had the same considerations, yet another kinase. It's a dual specificity tyrosine regulated kinase, DURK. So it's a member of the DURK kinase family, which are kinases which are regulated by phosphorylation on tyrosine residues, which are phosphorylating serine and threonine residues, a bit like MAP kinases. So in yeast, it was known that upon glucose starvation, YAC1 was activated through the activity of pKa, not so much TOR, and this was inhibiting cell proliferation in response to glucose starvation. So we had the idea that probably maybe in Arabidopsis, the same thing is going on. Then when TOR is inactivated, YAC1 is activated and inhibits cell proliferation and growth. And it was already known that YAC1 was involved in ABA and light responses in Arabidopsis. So first of all, we looked at this YAC1 mutant to see if they revert sugar induction of TOR activity, which was not present in the LST8 mutants, as you can see here, whereas in the wild type, sugar, as I told you before, is a very strong inducer of TOR activity, as assessed by phosphorylation of ribosomal proteinase 6. In the LST8 mutant, sugar is not activating TOR. And this is not suppressed by the suppressing mutation. So it means that when YAC1 is mutated, growth is restored, but TOR is not activated, is not any longer, is not reactivated by sugar, which means that we can disconnect growth stimulation from sugar activation of TOR in these mutants. And suggested also that YAC1 plays a role downstream of TOR. It does not restore TOR activation by sugars, but it restores growth inhibition by TOR suppression, TOR inhibition. Also, and this was also shown by Christopher Baglia's group, YAC1 mutations are able also to confer resistance to AZT, the TOR specific inhibitors that you can see here on this vertical plate. Wild type plants, LST8 mutants, you see they grow much less than the wild type. YAC1 mutants and YAC1 introgress in the LST8 mutation. And when you apply AZD, you see that YAC1 mutants are much less affected than the wild type, even at strong AZD concentration compared to the wild type control, whether it's only YAC1 that is mutated or when YAC1 is mutated in the LST8 background, which is hypersensitive also to AZD, and this is coherent also with the hypersensitivity to stresses. So, I don't know what happened here. Then we were able to show also in collaboration with the group of Gerd de Jager and Jelle van Lien in Ghent that YAC1 is a direct substrate of TOR. It means that you can phosphorylate the YAC1 kinase when you immunoprecipitate it in the presence of TOR active fractions. There is a complication, of course, because YAC1 being a kinase, it autophosphorylates, but there are also specific inhibitors of the YAC1 kinase that can be used, like this IND to inhibit YAC1 activity. And then you can see that when you also add TOR active fraction, you very clearly phosphorylate the YAC1 kinase, showing that YAC1 is indeed a substrate of TOR, and then it basically interacts with Raptor here shown in two hybrid experiments. In selective conditions, you only have growth of the yeast when you bring in Raptor and YAC1. Then we, as I showed you before, you see that, you know that TOR inhibitions also impact a lot on plant metabolisms and induce many metabolic variations, including accumulation of amino acids, including glutamine, accumulation of many different sugars. But when you bring in the YAC1 suppressive mutations in the LSTA background, you see that you suppress a lot of metabolic accumulations, including glutamine, but also sugars or organic acids. So it seems that YAC1 mutations are able to suppress the metabolic changes triggered by TOR defect on a very wide scale. And more generally, YAC1 mutations suppress a lot of the changes, transcriptomic, metabolic, growth, development, flowering, changes that are triggered by TOR inhibition. Basically, it really suppresses the effect of TOR inhibitions. We were able to obtain other suppressing mutation in the original LSTA screen, but we are not really been able to go to the causal mutation because they were much, these suppressing mutations were much weaker than the one confirmed by YAC1 mutation, which is probably the strongest suppressing mutations. So just to illustrate the effect of the YAC1 mutation, as I told you, see that glutamine again accumulates to very high level in the LSTA mutants. But when you bring in the YAC1 mutations in the LSTA background, you see that you completely suppress this strong glutamine accumulation and go back to almost wild type levels, not completely, but it's a very strong repression. So this has been done by GCMS metabolic analysis with our chemistry platform and with the help of Clément. So in the group of Christophe Orbaglia in Marseille, they actually used another genetic screen, which was a screen for resistance to the TOR-specific inhibitor AZD. And they uncovered, they also found the same mutations in the YAC1 kinase that were able to confer AZD resistance and which was really the strongest resistant mutants. So, and what they also been able to show is that YAC1, when activated, so when TOR is inhibited, is inducing expression of genes known as the Siamese genes, which are cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors. Basically, they're inhibitors of cell cycling. And upon induction of these Siamese genes, so there is a strong reduction in growth, and probably this is one of the ways where TOR inhibits growth is through activation of the YAC1 kinase, which activate these Siamese cell cycle inhibitors and which stop growth. Interestingly, when they use this PIND YAC1 specific inhibitors, you see that the induction of this Siamese gene is completely abolished. Siamese 4 or 5 is completely abolished in these conditions. So if we can start to summarize a bit what we have been observing during these studies. We know very clearly that sugars, either sucrose, fructose, or other sugars, are able to activate TOR in plants like in other organisms. And this sugar-TOR axis has been shown, for instance, by a group of genshin to be very important for activation of meristem activity and other biological processes by the other groups. What happens when then TOR is activated is probably it will inhibit the YAC1 kinase by phosphorylating it. It will inhibit SNRK1 kinase, probably, maybe, this is possibly. And it has been shown also by Elena Baena Gonzalez in a recent paper that TOR is interacting with SNRK1 in a complex. And this TOR activation by sugars then probably promote growth of leaves, growth of fruits by activation of meristems, flowering, seed filling. This is probably also linked to the fact that TOR activates E2F transcription factor, which is an important transcription factor for cell cycling and cell division, and probably also by the inhibition of these cyanase inhibitors of proliferation. When there is no sugar, starvation of sugar, TOR is inactivated. We don't know the mechanism so far, but probably it could be linked to the fact that SNRK1 is activated by TOR, by sugar starvation, and this will inhibit TOR by phosphorylating the raptor component of the TORC1 complex. And SNRK1 also in turn inhibits growth directly, but also TOR is no longer inhibiting the YAC1 kinase that become activated, and probably also contributes to the reduction of growth by, for instance, activating the cyanase cell cycle inhibitors. And we know that when we suppress this YAC1 activity, we have been able to show this before, we restore growth upon TOR inhibitions, which also suggests that it could also restore, also maybe diminish SNRK1 activity. This is not known. Or what is the relative contribution of SNRK1 or YAC1 in the control of growth is not known also. So to conclude more of that also on what is the influence of TOR and YAC1 on metabolic reprogramming and metabolic variations, we have shown that when you inhibit TOR, this is true either using AZD or genetic means studying mutants, you trigger strong metabolic reprogramming with accumulation of amino acids, accumulation of sugar, accumulation of starch, I didn't show it, accumulation of lipids, like microalgae producing lipids. You can very strongly induce lipid accumulation by inhibiting TOR or by performing nitrogen starvation. And probably this is linked to responses to ABA, because I tried to show it before, but there's no something happened in the slide. But we also been able to show that this, the ABA hypersensitivity to TOR mutants is also suppressed by YAC1 mutation. So probably YAC1 is affecting responses to ABA, which could also explain where some of this impact on plant metabolism and growth. Of course, this has been integrated with what we already know on the role of TOR, and we need also to identify this more YAC1 substrate to be able to explain what are the links between YAC1 activations, growth inhibition, so this could be the cyanase, but also metabolic reprogramming and developmental changes. So if I conclude more generally on our work, I didn't show everything, of course, today. We know that the functional TORC1 complex is present in plants, that TORC1 mutants are hypersensitive to abiotic stresses, including salt stress, osmotic stress, heat stress, and hypersensitive to abscisic acid. That abscisic acid inhibits TOR probably through SNRK1 and SNRK2, but also that TOR inhibits ABA responses, because TOR, that's been shown in a Cell paper, inhibits the ABA receptor, the pills ABA receptor directly by phosphorylating them. And in turn, SNRK1 inhibits also the raptor component of of the torsimer complex like SNERC1 in response to APA. But again, this is an example of this equilibrium that is maintained into the cells by reciprocal phosphorylation of antagonistic kinase. And I think this is an important mechanism for homeostasis maintenance. And of course, this crosstalk between the SNERC1 kinase, as I've mentioned already several times, is very important. So you can also add a lot of different components to these two regulatory pathways, SNERC1 stressors, because this also, by interacting continuously one with the other, bring a balance in the cell, the equilibrium, because when one is activated, the other is inhibited, but then becomes activated again to compensate, because when you trigger some change in response to stresses, to nutrient starvation, you have to be able to go back to the normal conditions, growth-promoting conditions, where the stresses are gone, where nutrients are back, etc. So you always have to maintain these close reciprocal equilibriums. Of course, TOR is connected also with many different hormonal inputs. I've talked about APA, but this is also true with auxin, and it's known that auxin through this HOP2 proteins, GTPase proteins is activated, auxin is activated, sorry, TOR through these HOP2 proteins. And conversely, TOR is needed also for responses to auxin by promoting translation of many ARF transcription factors. TOR is also, it has been shown recently added here that TOR is important also for cytokinin response by regulating translation of cytokinin degrading enzymes. It has been shown by the group of Xiong that TOR is important for acylene responses, or at least AIN2 functioning within the cell. And many other things. It's important, we have shown also with Ziyong Wang that TOR is important for brasinosteroid response by phosphorylating BIN2, PZR1 factors. It's important for Wuchel translation to E2F and Wuchel control, etc., and many other things. So I hope I've been able to convince you that TOR is important. We haven't done this work alone, but of course with collaborators, people that have been working with us in the team over the years. Again, strong collaboration with the people in Marseille, with Christophe Robaglia, other people along the years. These are just some recent collaborators with funding from ANR, our National Granting Agency, and also our cluster of excellence that is called Saclay Plant Sciences. So I hope you're still here because I didn't see anybody. So thank you for your attention. Yeah. Let's just mention the fact that Elena Baena Gonzalez and Camila Caldana, José Luis Crespo are organizing the second EMBO TOR meeting that will be unfortunately online, but maybe will be easier to participate. And that with Christophe and Yuba, we have been organizing the first EMBO TOR meeting in 2018. So if you want to have, I think you can still register and follow the talks and the discussions. You all be welcome. Thanks again for your attention. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.